4.4. Greatest common factor, and then star method is what we'll do second. But this first one, you are going to factor out the greatest common factor, okay? So if I give you something like this, 8x squared plus 16x, what you're looking for is a factor that you can take out of 8x squared and 16x to simplify your problem, okay? So you're looking for something that all of your numbers are divisible by and all of your variables are divisible by, okay? So right now, you have an 8 and you have a 16. What is the greatest common factor of 8 and 16? 8, okay? Then you have an x squared and an x. How many x's can you factor out of those two things? 1x, right? So you're going to factor out an x. So what you're doing is basically saying 8x squared divided by 8x and 16x divided by 8x. You're just dividing by whatever that greatest common factor is you pulled out. So 8x squared divided by 8x, this is 1. X squared divided by x. Do you remember what you do when you divide with exponents? Subtract, right? So x to the second divided by x to the first is x to the first. Okay? Then you have 16x divided by 8x. What is that? 2. Don't forget your plus. My parenthesis is way out there. So when you factor it out, it's 8x times x plus 2. When they ask you just factor it out, this is what they're looking for. What is your greatest common factor? If they ask you for the GCF, you only have to give that, 8x. Okay? When you factor it out, if they want you to factor it completely, you'll give that, the whole thing. Okay? So how about this one? If I have 12a squared b plus 16a cubed b. You're looking for a number to factor out of your numbers and variables to factor out of your variables. So 12 and 16 are both divisible by what number? The greatest of numbers that you can factor out, a 4. Okay? A to the what gets factored out? The second power. So a squared you can factor out, and b to the first. There's only a b to the first on both of those. So when they ask you to factor out your GCF, this is your GCF. Okay? Questions on that? Yes? Yeah, so your variables, you would pick your smallest exponent. Yes, of all the exponents that you have, pick the smallest one because you can't take more than what is there, right? So we can't take a to the third out because there's not an a to the third here. Are we good on that? That's GCF. Okay, then we're going to do star method. Well, you're going to get to love it because you're going to do so much of it. Okay, so star method. These first problems is going to be in the form ax squared plus bx plus c when a equals 1. Okay, so if your coefficient here is a 1, this is how you're going to do it. And we do everything with star method because then it's just consistent. It will look the same all the way through. But here's the setup of your star. Okay, it's like a big asterisk. Which has 6 spots to put things, okay? This top spot is going to be your A times your C, which for what we're doing right now is really just going to look like C because A is going to be 1, okay? So you multiply here, and on bottom is just your B. You're asking what can you add to get B. that you can multiply to get A times C. This will make a lot more sense once we actually do it with numbers. This number will always be your A value, which in these problems means it's going to be your 1. And then these are what you're solving for. Okay? Let me lay this out for you, and we'll talk through one. Let's say we have x squared plus 7x plus 12. Okay, make your asterisk. So on top you have A times C. What would that be? 12, right? There's a 1 here, essentially, so 1 times 12. Don't write it as 1 times 12. I just want you to see that's 1 times 12 is what you're getting. So you're going to put a 12 up there. Right, because your A term is going to be 1 for these first however many that I do. Okay, what's going to go down here? That's your 7. That's your B. Okay, your A term is a 1, so these are both 1s right now. And now you ask yourself the question, what can I multiply to get 12, right? Multiplication, that I can add to get 7. 3 and 4. So you put a 3 down here and a 4 down here. Now this is your two expressions, your two factors. So you get, your x is always going to go with your A term. So x plus 3, right? 1x plus 3 is one of your factors. And then the other one is going to be 1x plus 4. That is your answer. If you wrote it x plus 4 times x plus 3, that's okay. Bo, are you with me right now?
Yes.
Like on your iPad, you're with me right now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Second one. Let's say you have x squared minus 14x plus 33. So you make your star. What's going to go on top? 33. What goes on bottom? Negative 14. Be real careful with negatives, okay? Your A is 1, so you're just going to put 1s there. What can you multiply to get a positive 33 that you can add to get a negative 14? Negative 3, negative 11. You have to make sure you put the negatives in, okay? Negative 3 and negative 11. If I multiply those, I get a positive 33. If I add them, I get a negative 14. That process is the difficult part, right? What can I multiply that I can also add to get the two numbers that I'm looking for, okay? Now how you write this. The last one, it was 1 over 3. We called it x plus 3. What do you suppose we called this one? X minus 3. So this is x minus 3 times x, what? Minus 11.
Why did you put a box around one?
I was just showing you what I was talking about.
So
It doesn't mean anything.
It's
What you add to get this and what you multiply to get this. Oops. Okay. Proceed. X squared plus 3x minus 10. And if you feel like you've got this at some point, you don't have to do every single one of these written down with me. I just want you to see a lot to show you all your different options, okay? So you have what on top here? Negative 10. These are both 1s because your A term is going to be a 1, okay? What goes on bottom? 3. So what can you multiply to get negative 10 that you can add to get 3? 5 and negative 2. So a 5 and a negative 2. And now that's going to get you your two factors, right? It's going to be x plus 5. The x is always going to go with that top A number. And then x minus 2. How are we doing so far?
I am remembering Mr. Schulte teaching this.
No. You won't get a negative x on these.
What if it's negative? What if it's negative x squared? It won't ever be.
Huh. Today?
It won't
Yes.
ever be.
Not for anything that we're doing. I'm trying to think of a. It could be. Oh, it does? Okay, so then what was. Again, you're rushing me. I'm not there yet.
Well, you just
Ask
said
me
that-
later.
you just
I know,
said-
but you have an A. We don't have an A right now.
What do you-
You're doing problems with an A value. We're doing problems where A is 1. Come back to me when I get there. Okay. Let's do this one. God bless you. X squared minus 11x, bless you, plus 24. Okay? God bless you. Okay, so on top you have a 24, right? That's this number times this number, but that's a 1, so it's just 24. These are 1s, because our A is going to be 1 for now, and then a negative 11 on bottom. What can you add to get a negative 11 that you can multiply to get 24? Negative 3 and negative 8. Let me show you something real quick, you guys. Think about it this way. If this number is negative and this number is positive, you have to have 2 negatives, right? If this is a negative on the bottom, but it's positive on top, it's going to be 2 negative numbers because you're multiplying to get a positive, but you're adding to get a negative. The only way to add to get a negative is for at least one of them to be negative. In order for the top to be positive, they both have to be negative, okay? So this would be x minus 3 and x minus 8. Questions on that? Do we feel comfortable with this? Do we know where our numbers are coming from? If you don't, tell me now. No. We are not done. Okay. Example 3. Sometimes with these, you are going to factor out a greatest common factor first, and then do star method, okay? So look for it. Look if you can find a greatest common factor to come out of your problem. So let's say your problem is this: 2x squared plus 24x plus 64, okay? When you look at that problem, every one of those numbers is divisible by what? 2. Your greatest common factor is 2. And I'll tell you right now, this is where a lot of people miss a point because they leave off that 2 in their final answer. Don't do that, okay? If we're taking out a 2, what we're left with is a what? X squared, right? We're just dividing by 2 here, dividing by 2 here, dividing by 2 here. So it's going to be x squared plus 12x plus 32, okay? If I were you right now, I would write my final answer in before I even set up my star, because this is where people forget about the 2. I would write it, we know that 2 is going to be there, and we know it's going to be 2 binomials. So write that down. Then do your star and figure out what goes in there. Otherwise, this 2 always gets forgotten, and it's so sad. I don't want to take that point off, okay? So if we set up our star, we have 32 on top. Notice our A is a 1, right? This is a 1 in our problem. We have 12 on the bottom. This is 1 and 1. So what can I multiply to get 32 that I can add to get 12? 8 and 4. So this is going to be x plus 8 and x plus 4, and that is your answer. Please don't leave the 2 off. Okay?
Why isn't the 2 in front of both of those?
Because it's 2 times this times that, right? Everything is being multiplied. So it's 2 times your whole problem, but you're not like distributing the 2. You would distribute the 2 if you were going to multiply like an expression like that, right? But we have 2, think of it as like it's a number times a number times a number. Does that make sense? Okay. How about this one? Negative x squared minus x plus 20. Do you have a greatest common factor? -1, right? So we're going to factor out a -1, and we're left with x squared. Now it's plus x, right? Because we're dividing by -1. That makes this positive, okay? Plus or minus 20? Minus 20. Okay, so now we take our star. We have a -20 on top, a 1 on bottom, and our a is 1 still. So my answer is going to look like that. What can we multiply to get a -20 that we can add to get 1? A +5 and a -4. Okay, 5 times a -4 is -20. 5 plus -4 is 1. So this becomes x plus 5 and x minus 4, and that is your answer. So far, so good? Okay, now we're going to do them where our a is not equal to 1. So ax squared plus bx plus c when a doesn't equal 1. Technically, that last problem didn't have an a of 1. All right, so let's say it's 4x squared plus 7x plus 3, okay? We said this is a times c. So what is that in this problem? It's 12, right? 4 times 3 is 12. What's going to go down below here at the bottom? 7 at the bottom. Okay, what's our a? 4. So the 4s are going to go here, and this is where it can get a little bit fancy because you end up having to do some reducing with your numbers. We are looking for what we can multiply to get 12 that we can add to get 7. 3 and 4. Here's the thing. You're kind of thinking of these as a fraction, okay? It's not a fraction, but you're thinking of it as a fraction. Your left side here is 4x plus 3, okay? That's this guy. But your right side, if you think of it as 4 over 4, what should that really be? 1 over 1, okay? So you need to think of this as 1 over 1, which means your new setup, your new factor there is what? X plus 1, okay? You have to reduce that. If you want to check it, if you want to make sure you're right, what can you do from here?
You can do the
Foil, right? If we foil this, 4x squared plus 4x plus 3x is 7x plus 3. Okay, so you can always check it by foiling. All right? Let's do another one. 12x squared plus 7x plus 1. Set up your star. What's going to go on the top B? 12. 1 times 12. What's going to go on the bottom? 7. Your A is a 12, so put 12s up there. What can you multiply to get 12 that you can add to get 7? Are you getting sick of 4 and 3 yet? They show up a lot. So 12 over 4, we're going to reduce to what?
3.
Not 3. 3 over 1. Okay, leave it in that fraction looking form. 12 over 3 is going to be 4 over 1. That means you're using that and that in your expressions here. So what is the left side going to be? 3x plus 1. And the right side? 4x plus 1. So far, so good? I mean, for the most part, no. Yeah,
What about for the least part?
there's a few.
When you write your answer, it doesn't matter which order.
No, you can do 4x plus 1 and then 3x plus 1. That's totally fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Let's do this one. 3x squared minus 16x minus 12. What's going to go on top? Negative 36. You're doing negative 12 times 3. What goes on bottom? Negative 16. And your a term is 3. Okay. You're looking for what can you multiply to get a negative 36 that you can add to get a negative 16. Here's the deal. Multiplying to get a negative means what for the two numbers?
They're opposite.
They're opposites. One's a positive, one's a negative. Okay, if you're getting a negative up here, it's got to be one of each. Your job is figure out what are those one of each. What can you multiply to get negative 36 that you can add to get a negative 16? Negative 18 and 2. I'll tell you another place that I see a lot of mistakes is people pick the wrong number to be negative. If this has to be a negative 16, you don't want a positive 18 and a negative 2. That would be a positive 16, right? So just pay attention to where your negatives fall. This has to reduce to what? 1 over negative 6. This one doesn't reduce, so you're going to leave it as is. So your answer is going to be x minus 6 and then 3x plus 2. Doing okay? Okay. Last example. This is the one where you have to do the GCF first, but you also have an a value that is not 1, okay? So let's say you have 4x squared plus 14x minus 18. Okay, so you're checking, can I factor out my greatest common factor? What would your greatest common factor here be? 2. If I factor out a 2, I'm left with 2x squared, right? Because essentially you're just dividing all of these by 2. So 2x squared plus 7x minus 9. Okay, that means your answer is going to look like this. Don't forget about the 2, please. So you set up your star, and in your star, you're using this, not the extra 2. So 2 times negative 9 would be a negative 18 up top. What's your bottom number? 7. What's your a term? Okay, here's where a lot of people are going to want to say it's 4. It's not 4, because we factored out our greatest common factor, right? It is a 2. Make sure you use 2. Okay. What can you multiply to get a negative 18 that you can add to get a positive 7? Think about it this way. It's got to be one of each, a positive and a negative. Which one is the bigger absolute value? The positive, because your b is positive. Okay. So 9 and negative 2 will get you 7 and negative 18. Okay. That means it's 2x plus 9. This has to reduce to 1 over negative 1. So that's x minus 1. Okay, really get in the habit of what can I multiply and what can I add. Make sure you're not flipping those. And then it's always a times c on top and your b on bottom. Okay. What's the one in the homework that's the negative? Is it a negative 1?
I get it.
Okay. ¿Está bien?
Sure.
Who said no?
I'm just joking.
I was going to say, you gave me all the answers.
You just